Hey everybody, it's Chris joining you from my living room once again. I hope you guys had a great week. I hope you guys are enjoying your Sunday around lunchtime right now. I wanted to chat this week about uncertainty. Last week we talked a little bit about fear and stress and just kind of living into vulnerability and being real. We practiced that in our group chats with some discussion, which was fantastic. If you're not in those group chats, I'd love to get you connected to our group meets for our individual small groups and our big group, just so you can stay connected with friends and adult leaders. We'd love to get you into that. But this week with uncertainty, I think we're all feeling it to an extent right now, and I think it I think it can be kind of broken down and defined using a few things here. All right, so we're just kind of sitting in a season of waiting. We're just kind of waiting for this to be over. We're sitting in a season where we're waiting, and there's no defined period of time. So it's not that we're waiting and saying, okay, like 2 weeks, we'll be fine. It's that we're just sitting and we're not sure. All sorts of people are saying, oh, yeah, it should be over by this time, this summer maybe, or it'll be over, and then it might start a little bit more in the fall, like October, November. There might be another spike of this kind of stuff. And so it's just sitting here just so unsure and uncertain of what is actually going to happen, which makes it all the more stressful, right? Furthermore, we are kind of removed from our community at this point. Some people are removed from their family. Some people are removed from friends that are far away, friends that they're not able to see on a regular basis, removed from your church family, removed from Fusion, and removed from school, sports teams. There's a lot that we're removed from right now. And all those things kind of remove us from normal everyday life. So those kind of four qualities of being uncertain and living in uncertainty is just kind of just making this all the more strange, right? All the more difficult and stressful. I know for myself, as I start to think of uncertainty, the first thing I think of is, what do you do about haircuts during an epidemic? Do you just go? Do you not go? Do you try to learn it on YouTube and have somebody else cut your hair? I'm not sure. And so that's one thing that I've been kind of uncertain about. But furthermore, there's been some other uncertainty in my life. I have some problems with my esophagus right now, and I was put on a calendar. I had a little surgery coming up, and I was placed like a month and a half out. And so that was coming up. I was getting really, I was looking forward to it because I was hoping for some answers and some solutions to some problems I've been having with my esophagus. And they had to cancel my appointment. And so now I'm sitting in this season where it was supposed to happen on Thursday. And so I'm just kind of sitting here, and it could have been fixed. It could have been right. I could be having zero problems with my esophagus, and here I am, unsure of when that's even going to happen. I'm unable to put it on the schedule. I'm unable to work with their office right now on getting another procedure set up. And so there's some uncertainty in my life that is outside of COVID 19. And I'm sure that you guys are finding uncertainty too. If you're a senior in high school, just kind of uncertain of what this semester was supposed to look like. And what it looks like now, and what graduation looks like, and maybe even college for this fall for you guys. Uncertainty for seasons, uncertainty for performances, uncertainties for all kinds of events that you guys were looking forward to. It's brutal. And so I want to dive into that a little bit more this week with you guys and talk about uncertainty. And it's tough, all right. It's not easy, but I think that the Bible has walked us through some really uncertain times before, and those things that we talked about earlier of just sitting in a season of waiting, removed from community, and sitting outside of normal everyday life, and without a defined timeline of how long that uncertainty is going to last. That exists in 2020, but those things have existed long before 2020. All right, so we are going to be talking about this guy named Joseph. All right, if you guys grew up on Soul Street, you might know about Joseph and his coat of many colors. Right, so he's got a lot of brothers. Okay, so Joseph is one of many brothers, and his dad has picked Joseph out as his favorite. He's like, yeah, he's number one. And so to honor him as the number one favorite son, which if you're a parent, I'm sure is not a great idea to A, have a favorite, B, to market your favorite and advertise that they're the favorite. It's going to cause some problems and dissension among the ranks, I'm sure. So anyway, Joseph is gifted this beautiful, extravagant coat of many colors. And so standing out, Joseph is seen from miles away, just walking up to his brothers in this jacket and this coat. And he's just looking really great right now, looking super fly, and rocking this coat of many colors. And his brothers get so annoyed with it that eventually they decide, yeah, we're gonna take care of this guy. So they take Joseph, they kind of gang up on him, they team up against him, and they take his jacket, and they end up selling him into slavery, which is pretty huge. That's pretty brutal, and it's one of those moves as like a sibling. You're like, I really hope mom and dad don't find out that I sold my sibling into slavery. Kind of that, but on a bigger scale. So Joseph is sold into slavery by his own brothers, by his own family members. And he's taken away, and he's kind of bouncing around for a little bit, and eventually this high-ranking Egyptian official named Potiphar sees Joseph and decides, you know what, I'm gonna buy him. He's gonna come work for me. And so Joseph ends up at this guy named Potiphar's house. Okay, so Joseph is working at Potiphar's, and the Bible says in Genesis that God was with Joseph during this time. So Joseph is there, and everything that Joseph is doing, the Lord is just like turning it to gold. All right, he's just finding success in everything that Joseph is touching, and so Potiphar sees this, and he sees this like hardworking Hebrew. He sees this guy that is just crushing it, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna promote this guy. All right, and so real quick, I wanna just call a time out there. If you have ever been out to eat, if you've ever been to a store, if you've ever been to a water park, all right, and you got somebody working, all right, whether that's somebody stocking aisles that you're asking a question, if that's placing an order at a restaurant, if that is being yelled at by a lifeguard or asking a lifeguard a question at a water park or something like that, and they have a terrible attitude, you're not going to think that those people are going to get a promotion, right? Those people that whether you've had a job already, if you haven't had a job already, those people aren't usually the people that get promotions. Sometimes they do, but not always, right? And I think this says a lot about Joseph in this time. He had just been sold into slavery by his brothers, but he is working so hard, and he's kind of allowing God to be with him, and he's just kind of trusting God in this situation, that this guy that doesn't know Joseph at all, doesn't know his story, is just seeing Joseph like crush it, right? He's just watching as a fly on the wall, and saying, wow, Joseph is doing really, really well. So he appoints Joseph to be his like right-hand man. He puts Joseph in charge of all of his workers. He puts Joseph in charge of all of his servants. And Joseph is running the show at this point. He's in charge. And Potiphar just kind of trusts him entirely, trusts him with everything that he has. and Potiphar's wife sees Joseph too. And this is kind of a turning point in this story for Joseph, as he's just doing his job. He's doing everything that he's asked to do. And Potiphar's wife sees him and is like, "Hey Joseph, I'm into you now, all right." And Joseph resists this completely, and she keeps coming back to him, saying like, "Hey, I think that we should go out." And he's like, "No, like this isn't okay." And basically, she frames him and says that Joseph was kind of asking her out and making moves on her, and he ends up getting put in prison, right? So here he is 2 times over. He has been sold into slavery by his brothers, which he did not deserve, and now he's been put into prison for something he didn't even do. Potiphar's wife was the one kind of asking for all these things, and Joseph refused them, and so she got upset and she told Potiphar, which then angered Potiphar, and Joseph was thrown into prison. So now he's sitting in prison. He is sitting in an undefined amount of time. He is sitting in a season of just waiting. He is removed from everyone. He's removed from his friends back home. He's removed from his brothers because they were kind of the ones that sold him into slavery. He's now removed from anybody that he had built kind of a relationship with over at Potiphar's house. He's removed from Potiphar. It seems that they were kind of buds at one point, that Potiphar would trust him with everything. And now he's in prison. So he is utterly alone in this time period and has been removed from his normal everyday life earlier on by being sold, and then adjusted. And it's like, I'm going to transition into kind of leading the charge here at Potiphar's house, adjusted to that, and is removed from that too. And so now he is in prison. And now that looks like every day he wakes up and is confined to a cell. He's confined to being brought whatever is decided for him to eat that day or drink, and he is just essentially stuck. I think that his response in this is incredible, because Joseph, it doesn't record negative things that Joseph is doing. I would imagine it would be really, really tough to sit there. And I would imagine that, he's not having the best time in prison, but there are multiple times where he's given the opportunity to basically have a bad day, and he chooses not to. All right. So as he's in prison, the leader of Egypt, Pharaoh, is having some dreams. All right. And earlier on in Joseph's story, it actually tells us of some dreams that he saw and kind of interpreted that are going to come up later in this story. This is a really cool story. It's really long, so that's why we're kind of doing this summary. So anyway, Pharaoh is asking some of his right hand kind of officials to help him out. He's having some dreams and he needs help interpreting them. Well, it gets to the point where these guys aren't maybe doing their best job, and he sends them to prison. And Joseph helps one of these guys interpret Pharaoh's dreams. Because God has given him this gift, that God uses him to speak in these dreams that are alluding to something, and they're talking about a famine that's about to come up here in just a little bit. And Joseph is just used by God in these moments to communicate what is about to happen, and he's kind of interpreting this for Pharaoh in a lot of these situations. So this guy goes back. After Joseph had kind of helped him out, and Joseph lays like one last final claim, like, "Hey, if you can just remember me and mention like my name to Pharaoh, if you could, just remember me once you get up there. When this goes well for you, just remember me." And the guy forgets. So this guy is blessed by Pharaoh. This guy is doing really well himself. And the Bible tells us 2 years go by. And I think that this time period in researching this, it seems that it's about 10 years that he's sold into slavery through Potiphar's house, and and then sitting in prison. That this is like a 10-year time period. That's 10 years of this guy's life, and that's got to be so difficult for him just to kind of sit back in prison, knowing that he's done the right thing. But God has been with him this whole time, and Joseph has not been fighting anything this whole time either. Joseph has been just praising God throughout this. Anytime somebody comes to Joseph to talk about dreams, Joseph just decides to give glory to God in those moments. And we're going to read about that here in just one second. So this guy's up top. Pharaoh's having more dreams, and they're running into some problems that nobody can interpret it. What these dreams actually mean. And this is where those dreams about famine come to play. But this guy remembers Joseph in prison, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that guy. I need to get him plugged in. I need to get him connected to Pharaoh here." And so he brings Joseph up, and Joseph has some really cool things to say. All right, so we're going to read Genesis 41, and we're going to start in verse 15. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream and no one can interpret it, but I've heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." Verse 16, "I cannot do it," Joseph replied to Pharaoh, "but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." So even like in this first meeting with the king where he gets to kind of brag on himself, he's given this opportunity to brag on himself, he refuses it, and he just talks about the goodness of God. I would imagine that it would have been really easy in prison to kind of like update his resume, right? That he would have so much time to just think back about situations that had gone well for him, and some of those being times where he was able to interpret dreams. And with that being said, he would have times to think back of how God used him to interpret dreams. But if you're just sitting in prison bitter for so long, I'm sure that could turn into well, I had more to do with it than maybe I was giving myself credit at the beginning. But Joseph doesn't do that. Joseph just immediately dismisses any praise, dismisses any credit that's going to Joseph, and he's like, "God can give you these answers, but I can't." Right? So he talks to Pharaoh. They get some answers, and Genesis 41, verse 37, Pharaoh starts to see who Joseph has been this whole time. Joseph has become this awesome, faithful believer every day during this transition, during this trial, during this uncertainty. He has worked up his faith to this point. So Genesis 41, verse 37. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all of his officials. So Pharaoh asked him, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" All right, verse 39. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Whoa. So Joseph they've seen who Joseph is. They've seen his character. They've seen how wise he is, and they've seen his devotion to God. And that's not something that would just be on display if you were bitter for years in prison, just in a moment. That's not where that comes from. That comes from every day being devoted to God every day, just desiring to praise and honor Him and love Him. And Joseph was obedient during all this when he could have just yelled, "Just give me a break. Like, I haven't done anything wrong." He could have done that, but he didn't. And so now he's going from really rags to riches. He's going from prison to palace. He's walking into this incredible situation that the Lord has blessed him with, because the Lord has continued to find favor in Joseph, as Joseph has been in this season of uncertainty, has been in all these different situations, all these situations that are not fun, are really, really tough. And Joseph has just decided to worship him throughout it. which is so cool. And so as we look at this uncertainty, right, we talked about it sitting in a season of time and that time being undefined, and we're sitting there alone. We're sitting there outside of our normal everyday life. All those things were things that Joseph did too. Joseph was removed from family and friends and isolated in prison. He had no idea that at the end of this, it was going to be about 10 years of his life, 2 years waiting for that official to remember him and his gift that God uses to interpret dreams. He's waiting there and just loving God all the while. He has been removed from his everyday life, and he's just sitting and waiting for God to move. All right, and as we sit in this season where we aren't sure how long this is going to last, and we're sitting in the season where we don't know when the next time we're going to get together as a community with Fusion or with friends or your soccer team or your band. We get the opportunity to respond similar to what Joseph did, right? We get to respond to uncertainty faithfully to a God that cares for us and loves us and is so good to us even when we don't deserve it. And I've got some things that I want to leave you on how to respond to uncertainty. Some of these being straight out of the life from Joseph, all right? Number one is one day at a time. Just take it one day at a time. I'm sure if Joseph just sat there thinking, am I going to be here for the rest of my life? That if he had that kind of big picture in mind of I've been here for 4 years already, where am I going? That eventually that's where that bitterness just kind of runs rampant, and that bitterness and that anger and that fear and sadness start to just take over. And that removes those awesome things like humility. That removes that awesome stuff like worshiping God and giving him glory. That removes like being wise. Those things like get in the way of that, right? Of those kind of qualities. The second thing is focusing on the positive, not the negative. And so with that being said, like I know that is super simple, and I know it's maybe even cliche too. It's just like focus on being a positive person. But if Joseph would have been sitting in Potiphar's house, just angry, kind of throwing a pity party, I don't know if he would have been able to be promoted. And if he would have just been sitting in prison, thinking, "Oh man, if Potiphar's wife wouldn't have framed me, I would be in such a good place right now." He wouldn't have had the opportunity to be like the second most powerful person in all of Egypt, and still using that as a platform to glorify God and worship God. So incredible that he didn't let his past kind of define his future or his present. That he didn't use his past situations to stay angry or stay bitter. He allowed those things to come and go, and allow those things one day at a time to wash away as he just looked forward for the next thing that God was going to do, trusting him in really dark and painful times, but allowing God to move. And the last thing, he was also focused on blessing other people. He was in prison, could have absolutely just been focused on his own situation and how Potiphar's wife had framed him. And as these officials come in and they're in trouble, Joseph stops what he's doing to help them. He stops what he's doing to hear them out, hear about their problems, and to lend a hand. And as he comes up from prison and is meeting with Pharaoh, he's not like talking to Pharaoh of like, let's make a deal. I'll help you if you do these things. He's not doing that. He is proclaiming the glory of God. He is sitting back saying, I'll help you however I can. That God would use me to help you. I'd love to be here in this situation to help you interpret these dreams through God. It's everything that God is doing in this moment. I'm just kind of this vessel being used as just kind of that. So with that being said, those things are things that we can do every day. Those things are what we can do from afar. Those things are what we can do as a neighbor. and those things can get us through this season of uncertainty. One day at a time, where we are not focused on the negative, we're focused on the positive, and we're also focused on blessing others. One of the cool things that Michaela and I have found out during the season is the weather is turning into kind of springish sometime, and so it's really nice outside all the time. And so we're going on lots of walks with our dog, and so are other people. And so we have met so many neighbors that we haven't had the chance to meet yet, and we've had so many opportunities to. Stay 6 feet away, but also chat up our neighbors and kind of hear about how they're doing, because everyone is going through literally the same situation right now. But there are so many people out there asking questions, so many people out there longing for community, and just getting outside and walking with family is a way that you can just connect and set those situations that are causing you stress aside. Whether that's a procedure you're waiting for that there's no kind of timetable for, whether that's you just don't know what to do with your hair, whatever it is, I just challenge you guys this week to get out, to find a way, whether that's connecting with somebody online, whether that's walking around with your family outside, whatever it is. I just ask that you guys would look to take this season one step at a time, that you would look to bless other people, and that you would look to focus on the positive, that our God is a God that doesn't fall off his throne, instead of the negative of what we might be missing during this season. Guys, take care. We are going to be putting our discussion questions out here in a couple days. They're already ready. We're just going to give you guys some time to check out this message and to share it with maybe a friend or a family member that might need to see and hear some truth that comes solely from the Lord. Guys, we love you. Take care. Stay healthy. Keep washing your hands, and we'll talk to you soon. All right? Bye.